Good evening. My name is Jennifer Wilkes, and I have the privilege of directing the John L. Warfield Center for African and African American Studies at the University of Texas at Austin. I'm delighted to welcome you in person and online to the 2024 Eric Williams Memorial Lecture, the 22nd in this distinguished series and the third here at UT. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that present-day Texas sits on the unceded territory of the Alabama Coushatta, Caddo, Carrizo Comecrudo, Hualuitecan, Comanche, Kickapoo, Lipan Apache, Tonkawa, and Isleta del Sur Pueblo peoples. I ask that we also remember the struggles and legacies of Tejano, Black, Asian, Native American, and other peoples who have created this space within the context of ongoing dispossession and cultural violence. The Eric Williams Memorial Lecture would not be possible without community support. I'd like to thank the Planning Committee for its tireless work, Erica Williams Connell, curator of the Eric Williams Memorial Collection, Research Library, Archives, and Museum, Dr. Lorraine Liu, Professor of Latin American Cultural Studies and Director of the Archiving Black Americas Project, Ana Molina Amaya, Senior Administrative Program Coordinator for the Warfield Center, Rachel Winston, UT's Black Diaspora Archivist, and Nicole Smythe Johnson, PhD candidate in art and art history. Our efforts, yes, thank you. Our efforts, in turn, have been brought to fruition by the volunteers who have greeted and guided you this evening. Thank you. Many thanks are also due to our event partners, Dr. Samantha Pinto, Director of the Humanities Institute, Dr. Adela Pineda Franco, Director of Lila Benson Latin American Studies and Collections, Dr. Jackie Cuevas, Interim Director of the Center for Women's and Gender Studies, Dr. Allison Kafer, Director of LGBTQ Studies, Dr. Lisa Moore, Chair, Department of Women's, Gender, and Sexuality Studies, Lisa Olstein, Director of the New Writers Project, and Katrina and Eric Brooks, whose Black Pearl Books is not only one of Austin's best bookstores, but also a vital community hub. Thank you all. Finally, I would like to thank, in his absence, His Excellency Anthony Philip Spencer, Ambassador Emeritus of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago to the United States and Mexico. He has generously given of his time and his encouragement since the EWML's move to Austin. He's helped to convey and celebrate the legacy of Eric Williams, and we are especially grateful for his support this year as we look forward to observing the 80th anniversary of the publication of Williams's groundbreaking Capitalism and Slavery. Please join me again in welcoming, in thanking, everyone who's been a part of tonight's program.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Nicole Smythe Johnson, and as Dr. Wilkes mentioned, I'm a PhD student in art history and a PhD candidate, in fact, here at UT. So some of you may know that it's the 80th anniversary of the publication of Capitalism and Slavery. And so to give you a sense of the significance of that, we've put together a little video, and I'm going to go ahead and play that.
What he did for Trinidad and Tobago was an expression of love.
No one was a greater fighter. No one was a greater leader than Dr. Williams.
Trinidad's man for all seasons, Dr. Eric Williams.
He was a rare gift to this world's inhabitants.
President of the Dominican Republic, Leonel Fernandez, in 2005 called Williams a great thinker. he enrolled in 1932 to Oxford University to read history. Williams gained a first-place Bachelor of Arts with first-class honors in modern history, an unprecedented college attainment. He successfully defended his controversial and groundbreaking PhD thesis, The Economic Aspect of the Abolition of the West Indian Slave Trade and Slavery. When later published, this work would become a watershed in the history of the British transatlantic slave trade. Dr. Williams' dissertation posited that the abolition of slavery resulted less from profound philosophical and humanitarian concerns than from technological advances and a decline in its profitability. In 1939, Dr. Williams taught at Washington, D.C.'s Howard University. There he compiled and edited its first social sciences textbook. At Howard, Dr. Williams connected with the influential African-American intelligentsia, W.E.B. Du Bois, A. Philip Randolph, Carter G. Woodson, and he taught with John Hope Franklin.
To set up a nation and breathe life into it and provide the principles by which that nation then can live and live on indefinitely, that is a remarkable contribution.
Trinidad and Tobago's first premier, the scholar-turned statesman, navigated its unmoorings from Great Britain and docked his homeland, as he wrote, at its day of destiny, August 31st, 1962. Dr. Williams became the first prime minister.
You, the children, yours is the great responsibility to educate your parents. Teach them to live together in harmony. To your tender and loving hands, the future of the nation is entrusted. In your innocent heart, the pride of the nation is enshrined. On your scholastic development, the salvation of the nation is dependent. You carry the future of Trinidad and Tobago in your school bag.
He was intent on finding a publisher for his thesis. Dr. Williams was elated when the University of North Carolina Press published it as Capitalism and Slavery in 1944. The book was both vilified and extolled for its original stance and intrepid content. 53 years later, in 1997, this landmark study was quoted in the New York Times Book Review as the cutting edge of slave trade research in academic circles. African-American leaders in Brooklyn, New York are vehemently invoking the book. Barclays, the UK banking giant, is paying $400 million for the naming rights of their new basketball stadium. Barclays was one of the principal beneficiaries of slave trade profits. Author, activist, and University of California professor Angela Davis.
Eric Williams was also an activist, a public intellectual. Those of us who were absolutely inspired by the brilliant book published in 1944 by Eric E. Williams entitled Capitalism and Slavery. The overall project of Williams' work was to disprove the widespread assumption that the system of slavery was abolished by the British because of their humanitarian proclivities. In other words, they simply became aware of the fact that slavery was morally wrong, and they quite rapidly moved to correct this infamy. Eric Williams argued that the real reason slavery was abolished was that it was no longer of service to capitalism as it had been during earlier periods, where it played a crucial role in what Marx called primitive accumulation. At that time, disputing the role of British humanitarianism was a scandalous idea. British publishers actually refused to publish Capitalism and Slavery. It was published in 1944 here in this country, but it did not come out in Britain until 20 years later. Not until last year, 2022, was there a major mass market edition of Capitalism and Slavery in England. Random House Penguin published it in 2022. And what is perhaps even more significant is that it became a bestseller 80 years after it was first published. It became a bestseller in Britain. And I think this is a lesson for scholars and activists alike. This work had to wait almost an entire century to resonate in the way the author and people like C.L.R. James thought it should have resonated at the time of its publication.
And thank you very much to Lates for helping us to put that together. So, as someone who made my first American home in St. Paul, Minnesota, and loved it, in spite of the winters, I am especially happy to welcome Danez Smith, a Black, queer, prose writer and performer from St. Paul, Minnesota. Danez is the author of 2 chapbooks and 3 poetry collections. Their first collection, Insert Boy, was published in 2014 and won the Kate Tufts Discovery Award and the Lambda Literary Award for Gay Poetry. Don't Call Us Dead, their second collection, was winner of the Midwest Booksellers' Choice Award, a finalist for the National Book Award, and made Smith the youngest ever winner of the Forward Prize for Best Collection, one of the UK's most prestigious prizes for poetry. In 2020, as the Twin Cities and the nation reckoned with the murder of George Floyd and the tradition of anti-Black violence that moment made visible, Smith's performance of Dear White America, a poem from Don't Call Us Dead, became a viral sensation, earning them the double-edged moniker of literary star. If Don't Call Us Dead drew the accolades and gaze of a global mainstream, their most recent collection, Homie, is a decisive pivot to a more select audience. Smith has said of the collection, "I was writing to friends, to family, to people I wanted to speak to. I had to shut off the idea that my poems are now being read by this wider audience. I'm still invested in this intimate and small table. I can name the people that my poems are for." Homie was winner of the Minnesota Book Award, the Heartland Bookseller Award, and a finalist for the National Book Critics Circle Award. In addition to all that, Smith is the recipient of fellowships from the Poetry Foundation, the McKnight Foundation, the Montalvo Arts Center, Cave Canem, and the National Endowment for the Arts. Their work has been featured widely, appearing on platforms such as BuzzFeed, The New York Times, PBS NewsHour, Best American Poetry, Poetry Magazine, and on The Late Show with Stephen Colbert. Unsurprisingly, for someone who has said, "The first writing I ever loved was the Sunday sermon," Smith is an accomplished performer. Indeed, it was one of their performances that brought them to the attention of the EWML committee. That said, they are clear that their first allegiance is with what the poem wants to be, in terms of how it looks. So don't miss the opportunity to grab one of Smith's books from Black Pearl outside. And look out for their forthcoming collection, Bluff, which is out in August. Danez is a member of the Dark Noise Collective and was the co-host of VS with Franny Choi, an award-winning podcast sponsored by the Poetry Foundation and Post Loudness. Their work reminds us that poems save lives. And I must say, what was said at the bus stop, a poem from Homie, certainly came to my rescue last night after a long day of too much news. So thank you for your work. Having said all that, please join me in welcoming Danez Smith.
Good evening. Oh, okay. We're gonna put laptop here. How are y'all doing? Good. Like some of y'all didn't say anything, so I'm gonna try that again. I'll do the normal like good evening, and y'all do it resoundingly. Good evening. Thank you. Appreciate that. It's nice to be here with y'all. My name is Danez Smith. I would just like to say a couple thank yous up top. Just thank you to everybody from the Warfield Center to Dr. Wilkes, who I'm so excited to speak with tonight. We've had a fantastic conversation about a year and a half ago here during Banned Book Week, and I'm elated to see what we talk about tonight. To Iana, I believe you were in the hotel lobby waiting for me. I apologize for not being there. Thank you to Anna, who received me here after I didn't read the itinerary that well. Thank you, and want to just give honor and peace and dreams of revolution and retribution for the peoples whose ancestral lands this university sits on. I want to thank all the folks whose labor often goes unrecognized to make universities and hotels and conference centers and all these spaces where we do these things happen. Thank you to the folks here doing the, yes, clap. To the folks who are doing the lights and the sound, who will clean this after we leave. Thank you to, what's the proper honorific for Dr.? Is it Dr. Eric Williams or is it Prime Minister Eric Williams or all that? Doctor, he was Prime Minister, Dr. Prime Minister. We're going to put respect on Dr. Prime Minister Eric Williams and his family for continuing to steward his name and make sure that it echoes throughout history as it should. I'm thankful for the video and especially to the words of Dr. Davis, who I think gave us a profound context for, I think some of us in this like new world, it's beautiful that capitalism and slavery is a bestseller now, right? Slavery has left such a long shadow on our future, and it only makes sense that the discussion of it as well will have as long a shadow as we unravel ourselves from the travesties that were, right? And the travesties that continue to come. I thought that because it is the 80th anniversary of capitalism, slavery, that the poems I would read would echo somewhere between those two words and the histories that come from them. So I think I'm going to read mainly, at least at first, from my new book that is not out yet. And I'm going to set a timer because I like to talk. I love talking, y'all. Cool. So we're going to make sure that we don't go too far over. Actually, no, let's start with maybe a poem that echoes between capitalism and slavery most bluntly, and says so. This is from Homie. This poem is after the great poets of the Wu-Tang Clan, and after the great American poet Morgan Parker. This is called Cream. In the money, that's a Mr. Freudian. In the morning, I think about money. Green-horned lord of my waking, forest in which I stumble towards no salvation, prison made of emerald and pennies. In my wallet, I keep anxiety and a condom. I used to sell my body until my blood spoiled. All my favorite songs warn me to get money. I'd rob a bank, but I'm a poet. I'm so broke, I'm a genius. If I was white, I'd take pictures of other pictures and sell them for 6 figures. That actually happened. This dude was taking screenshots from Instagram and then selling them for 6 figures. White people are wild. I come from sharecroppers who come from slaves who do not come from kings. Sometimes I pay the weed man before I pay the light bill. Sometimes as a synonym for often. I just want a rich white sugar daddy and I'll be straight. I feel most colored when I'm looking at my bank account. When I scream ball so hard, motherfuckers want to find me. Sally Mae, a motherfucker, she want to find me. I spent one summer stealing from 3 different rag stocks. Always bought a ring. If I went to jail, jail, I'd live rent-free, but there's no way to avoid making white people richer. A prison is a plantation made of steel and stone. Being locked up for selling drugs is being locked up for trying to feed your family. I used to help him bag it up. A bald fade costs 20 bones nowadays. My grandma is great at saving money. What's a blacker tax than blackness? Before my grandfather passed, he showed me where he hid his money and his gun. What's the cost of being poor? What costs more than being poor? My aunt can't hold on to $1, a job, her mind. How much the Powerball this week? I'ma print my own money and be my own God and live forever in the green frame. I was warm inside, my mother's broke. Don't ask me about my taxes. The B in debt is a silent black trap. All right. Thank you. Where shall we go from there? Yeah. This is from the new book, which I think is thinking a lot about the role of the artist, the role of capitalism in art, or what capitalism does to art. Is thinking about the future, about what shed in order to arrive at that future. It also thinks a lot about family. There's like love poems. It's long. You see how thick this is? So there's a lot of different threads, but we'll see what we can pull on today. Cool. This poem is called Less Hope. Apologies. I was part of the joy industrial complex. Told them their bodies were miracles and they ate it up. Sold someday, made money off soon and now. Stuck an ode into the elegy. Forced the dead to smile and juke, implied America. Said destroy, but offered nary step nor tool. Paid taxes, knowing where the funds go. In April, offerings to my mother's slow murder. By May, my sister filled with the bullets I bought. June, and my father's life locked in a box I built. My brother's end plotted as I spend. IDK, why I told you it would be okay? Not, won't. When they aren't killing you, they're killing someone else. Sometimes their hands at the end of your wrist. You and me are agent and enemy. There I was, writing anthems in a nation whose victory was my blood made visible. Mama too sugared to weep without melting. My rage fed their comfort foaming. My rage fed their comfort foaming at my racial mouth, singing gospel for a God they beat me into loving. Lord, your tomorrows hold no sway. Your heavens too late. I abandon you as you did me. Say la vie, but sweet Satan. OG Dark kicked out the sky. First fallen and niggered thing. What's good? Who owns it? Where it come from? Satan. First segregation. Mother of exile. What do you promise in your fire? For a real freedom I offer over their souls. Theirs, mine's is mine's. I refuse any hell again. I've known nearer devils, the audience and the mirror. They make you look weak. They clapped at my eulogies. They said encore, encore. We wanted to stop being killed and they thanked me for beauty and pitifully. I love them. I thank them. I took the awards and cashed the checks. I did the one about the boy when requested, traded their names for followers. In lieu of action, I wrote a book, edited my war cries down to prayers. Oh, devil. They gave me God and gave me clout. They took my poems and took my blades. Satan, like you did for God, I sang. I sang for my enemy, who was my God. I gave it my best. I bowed and worst smiled. Teach me to never bend again. Ooh. Word. Few more poems. I'm gonna try not to talk too much in between poems. That one? Nah, that's for another reading. We only got 20 minutes. Word. This one's called Volta. This universe, my most docile and stunted, Weapons rounded into words, my work so undangerous they untapped my phone. Found no threat, the shame I felt. My oppressors fear me not. They see their chains working. Universe where I am a match, head thrown back, laugh feeding the flame while massa screams into kindling. Teach me the surprise in the middle of obedience. Give me the road to that final glee, you giggling ash. Shiver I feel bowing my head on the street. And universe where I am a late queen, Christ locked in fat off Friday fish, rumor robed lonely next to gray angels. I ask your late Volta, long avoided birth, that not yet, then now I need a new bravery. I don't want to live a coward's peace. Where's my mission? What world comes if I use my hands? Headed. Escape and travel mean the same to me. Add, took. Can't see journey and not see flee. To run to implies away. Here, pointing at left. Little fugitive. Little used to slave. Where does the map end? Little broke out. Little dipped. Where is freedom's home? Little off the chain, little stole back. There is a place where your blues is not fuel, coin, unrequired and softer. I seen it in a dream inside one of their necks. A hole I put there. Cool. Clap to break up the space. How about that? Yeah. Word. Maybe one more from this one, and then we'll get to some other stuff. This is a big book. Why is this poem so far into there? Okay. No. I passed it. All right, still learning it. There it is. All right. I was sitting on a plane. I had just finished reading what was I reading? Ordinary Notes by Christina Sharp, which is a fantastic collection. If you're interested, it'd actually be a really good class to read Capitalism and Slavery coupled with In the Wake by Christina Sharp. If there's any professors out there, that's a freebie. Thinking about different aftermaths of what they do. So I was reading Christina Sharp and watching Interstellar, which, have y'all seen that movie? It's fantastic and it's horrible. Because like all this science and then the thing that like controls gravity is love. So awful, horrible, the stuff of poems. So I was thinking about gravity and time and slavery, and this is the poem that came out. Cool. Relativity. It's been centuries inside this grief. And since electricity in the home, then in the hand, but still the fields. Then the gravity under a collapsed sun, and each bullet its own star, and the gravity under that knee, that hold that seemed to send time echoing back and forward and still. Like sound from a bell, bleeding from the sky and still stuck inside, dancing until dead. Love the bell, cruelty the ringing, grief the ear that catches the sound, we the air, disrupted, cruelty song moving through, we survive or don't, the notes. It's not just the field, or what burrows through space to sweep us from Earth. Everything its weight, everything its pull, its horizon morphing our brief event. And love, too, can lock us out of time and may you knew or know or collide into that tether and stall. But today, which by this time was ages ago, it's gonna take too many tomorrows to get through yesterday. I pray for time to deal with now. No, I pray to time. Word. What time is it? How long has this little thing been going off? Where's my clock at? Okay, 8 minutes. Oh, we're solid. Okay. Love that. Okay, where should we go from here? We did Interstellar. Let's do the one about leaving Earth. Okay. Cool. Let me see if I remember this one. I don't normally do it. Because it used to take a lot out of me to do it. I'm about to do the poem Dear White America. And it became really weird for me, right? Because I wrote it actually on commission for this group in Oakland called Young, Gifted, and Black, which is a phenomenal performance troupe of like young Black kids who do their thing. And so I wrote it for them. And it filled me with such power to do it. And oh my God, and I used to yell and all the other stuff. And I was still a slam poet then. Oh, but then you just get invited to like 80 universities to like do your angry at white people poem. And then it really transforms how you live, right? And like not trying to like diminish this space, right? Because this is great, right? We're like changing lives. We're doing the thing. We're having conversations, right? Maybe one of you will go off and like, you know, throw the first brick at the revolution because of something you heard tonight. I hope so. But it like started this like complex relationship for me. Like writing this poem was very much tied to like me having more capital in capitalism, right? And like I think that is an interesting relationship always for me, the fugitives relationship or the slaves relationship to money, right? And like sort of how capitalism so easy can swallow any attempt to destroy it and make it servable to itself. Interesting thing, right? Oh, God. Oh, capitalism. What a thing. We keep doing it, huh? All right. I guess. Dear white America, I've left Earth in search of darker planets, a solar system that revolves too near a black hole. I left Earth in search of a new God. I do not trust the gods you have given us. My grandmother's hallelujah is only outdone by the fear she nurses each time the blood-fat summer swallows another child who used to sing in the choir. Take your God back. Though his songs are beautiful, his miracles are inconsistent. I want the fate of Lazarus for Juanisha. I want Chucky, Bo, Mo, Sean, Trayvon, Janila risen 3 days after their entombing. Their ghosts regifted flesh and blood. Their flesh and blood regifted their children. I left Earth. I am equal parts sick of your go back to Africa's as I am your I just don't see races. Neither did the poplar tree. We did not build your boats, though we did leave a trail of kin to guide us home. We did not build your prisons, though we did, and we filled them too. We did not ask to be part of your America, though are we not America? Her bones brittle, dress ripped, dragging her dead child through Oakland. I am sick of standing this ground. I will not call your recklessness the law. Each night I count my brothers, and in the morning when some don't survive to be counted, I count the holes you leave. Your master magic trick, America. Now he's breathing, now he don't. Abracadabra, white bread voodoo, this sorcery you claim not to practice. Hand my cousin a pistol to do your work. I tried, white people, shit. I tried to love y'all, but you spent my brother's funeral making plans for brunch, talking too loud next to his bones. You took one look at the river, plump with the body of boy after girl after sweet, sweet child, and asked, why does it always have to be about race? Cause you made it that way. Cause you put an asterisk next to my sister's gorgeous face. Call her pretty for a black girl, cause black girls go missing without a whisper of where. Because there are no Amber Alerts for amber-skinned girls. Because Jordan boomed and Emmett whistled and Martin preached it and Malcolm spoke it. Because black boys have always been too loud to live. Because it's taken my father's time, my mother's time, my grandpa's time, my grandma's time, my aunt's time, my uncle's time, my sister's time, my brother's time, my niece's time, my nephew's time. How much time do you want for this progress? I have left Earth. And I won't stop until I find a place where my kin can be safe, until black people ain't but people the same color as the good, wet earth, until that means something. Until then, I bid you well, I bid you war, I bid you our lives to gamble with no more. I have left Earth, and I am touching everything you beg those telescopes to show you. I am giving the stars their right names. And this new life, this new way, our new world you cannot see or touch or steal or ship or whip or rape or separate or cut or amputate or burn or hang or free or Jim Crow or red line or shoot or jail or shoot or jail or shoot or jail or shoot or jail or accident or jail or shoot or jail or shoot 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 or ruin. No. This, if only this one star-shot light is ours. Oof. Thank you. Woo. Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you. Whew. All right, maybe one more poem to wrap us up, and then we'll go do some stuff. All right, where was I? Hi, good to see y'all here. Short one, funny one. Oh, this is the wrong book for funny. Yeah, there ain't no funny shit in this one. Although there is a poem where I describe an angel with fried chicken wings. Which I think is fun. Cool. Should we stay in Don't Call Us Dead? Should we do Summer Somewhere? That's even more emotional. Yeah, let's do it. All right. Yeah, my heart is there. I'm thinking about that boy that died trying to protect his mama. Been on my heart. Every time I see a video on the timeline of him in his dance class. And think about the innocence that is torn from us, sometimes because of racism, sometimes because of our very own hands, in the hands of cruelty, a world that inspires such horrible acts of cruelty. It's for all the boys we lost. Summer somewhere. Somewhere, a sun. Below, boys brown as rye. Play the dozen and ball. Jump in the air and stay there. Boys become new moons. Gum dark on all sides. Beg bruised blue water to fly. At least tide. At least spit back a father or two. I won't get started. History is what it is. It knows what it did. Bad dog, bad blood, bad day to be a boy. Color of a July well spent. But here, not heaven, not earth. We can't recall our white shirts turned a ruby gown. Here, there's no language for officer or law, no color to call white. If snow fell, it'd fall black. Please don't call us dead. Call us alive, someplace better. We say our own names when we pray. We go out for sweets, come back. No need for geography now that we're safe anywhere. Point to wherever you please and call it church or home or sweet love. Paradise is a world where everything is sanctuary and nothing is a gun. Here, if it grows, it knows its place in history. Yesterday, a poplar told me of old forests heavy with fruit that I'd call uncle, bursting red pope and set afire, a harvest of dark wind chimes. Then, after I fell, it kissed sap into my wounds. Do you know what it's like to live someplace that loves you back? There, I drowned back before, once. There, I was a dead fish, the river's prince. There, I knew how to swim, but couldn't. There, 4 men stood by shore and watched me blue. There, I had a face, and then I didn't. There, my mother cried over me, open casket, but I wasn't there. I was here by my own water, singing a song I learned somewhere south of somewhere worse, but that was when direction mattered. Now, everywhere I am is the center of everything. I must be the Lord of something. What was I before? A boy, a son, a warning, a myth? I whistled. Now, I'm the god of whistling. I built my Olympia downstream, and you're not welcome. Trust, the trip will kill. We earned this paradise by a death we didn't deserve. I'm sure that there are other heres, a somewhere for every kind of somebody, a heaven of black girls braiding on golden stoops. But someone prayed we'd rest in peace. Here we are, in peace, whole, all summer. Thank you. Thank you all. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Wow, Danez, thank you so much. Thank you. So I know that stirring poetry and those stirring performances have the wheels in your mind turning. So I'm going to ask a few questions, but get your questions ready. So you have a chance to share them with Danez as well. And actually, I'm going to set the timer on my watch because if you take a look at my books, I have lots of Post-it notes. There are lots of things I could ask, and I was taking notes while Danez was reading, and I don't want to monopolize the conversation. So let me just set the timer. Okay, so let's do this.
Do it.
Okay.
All right.
So I want to start with a question that is about time and about form, and because I think that those are themes that resonate across your collections, including Bluff. And so The committee chose the title Prose Poetry is Rebellion from an essay by Wendy Chen, and she writes that prose poetry is traditionally served as expression of resistance and rebellion against the past, and by nature, prose poetry resists definition. But I want to zero in or start the conversation by thinking about this idea of rebelling against the past, because time is such an important force in your work. But as your work shows us, as thinking about the long shadow of slavery that you mentioned, that Sharp unpacks, that Dr. Williams explores, there's a weight that can come with engaging with time and thinking about somewhere, there's a freedom that can come with timelessness, even if that timelessness comes out of tragedy. So how do you think about your work in relationship to time, if you don't mind starting there?
Oh, are you my therapist? No, it's like, I'm actually like writing a whole book of poems about time right now. I thought it was new to me, but apparently it's all over the place. Tell me what I've been doing. No, so I think, time is a complicated thing, right? I am writing it, like I said, I am writing this book that is like writing, I think it's like most of it right now is like writing these letters to time. Maybe time is a stand-in for God sometimes, but I'm just like thinking about the enormity of time and how we move through it and how we have these wild relationships to it. And also like, I think Alan Whiteman has a novel that everyone should read called Einstein's Dreams, which is made up largely of like these little like 4-page chapters that are like Einstein's dream journal as he was an imagining of Einstein's dream journal as he was like approaching the theory of relativity. So these dreams always of like these worlds that have an alternate relationship to time than ours does. And I say that to say, like, for me, the past as a position in time for sure has so much gravity, right? That like we keep chugging for further and further and further in the future, right? Time is only forward, and yet we grasp heavily to what has happened, right? And we take it with us. There are events that we might spend the rest of our lives surviving. There are things that happened before we were born that have these massive impacts on our life. And so while I think part of any artist or thinker's role is to like untangle that past and have a clearer view on it. I don't know, you were like rebelling. I don't know if we rebel against the past. It's too permanent, right? I can't change anything about the past. Like, I wish so many things, but I can't, right? And so I feel like maybe it's not rebelling against the past, but rebelling into the future, right? How do we, are there certain things that we maybe accept as standard ideas of the present that we need to quickly make the past, right? So that's what I kind of think about, how do we rebel against the conditions that the past has set that we have arrived into this present moment into, and imagine something different, right? When I think about the poem Summer Somewhere, there's a lot of poems that I feel like a kinship to, in terms of like what I was thinking about when I was writing that, but it owes a huge debt to just like so many science fiction writers, and speculative fiction writers who are imagining the possibilities of the future and are imagining alternate spaces, right? To me, Summer Somewhere is just about this alternate heaven, right? It's this other space, right? And I find a great freedom in that as a poet, that some of the questions I can seek answers outside of reality. And for me, I hope then. And I think I've learned this from, right, like sometimes you read a science fiction book and it helps you figure out your very real, not vampire life, right? Or your not like Star Wars life, right? So there are incredible lessons in that, right? And it's just sort of, I think about it as when I'm thinking about how our relationship with time, especially as artists, affects other people and like who reads our work. Maybe what I'm trying to do is like sometimes I'm trying to like deal with reality, and sometimes I think it's easier just to like let's shift ourselves out of the reality because it might be a little bit easier to dream or to say what we need to say outside of the boundaries of the known world. Yeah.
Thank you so much. So I am thrilled to hear you mention sci-fi, science fiction. Some people don't like the abbreviated form because when you're talking about Interstellar, talking about leaving the planet with Dear White America, and then again with Somewhere Somewhere, I was thinking, oh my gosh, like I need to reread Danez's work alongside Octavia Butler's Parable of the Sower. And so, yeah, so, and I hope there's a question in here somewhere. But, you know, I'm just thinking about this idea of rebelling into the future as opposed to rebelling against the past, of imagining what might be instead of being trapped in the limited perceptions and names and categories, right, that exist in our current world. And the idea from Butler that's resonating with me is Olamina's idea of taking root among the stars, right? So, but then I guess I'm going to ask you, what about taking root here on Earth, or like re-rooting ourselves here on Earth after we've taken that imaginative leap to space beyond the limits of the planet and its many complex histories? And then the last part of the question, I promise, because this is an actual question, is there are also so many wonderful natural references in your work. So trees and streams and oceans. So this idea of Earth in terms of the planet as a place that might be able to heal us as well is something that I think your work conjures. So can we rebel, imagine into the future, into the stars, and then come back to Earth?
For sure. Yeah, I think that is exactly it, right? I think Octavia Butler, you know, even though there might be aliens, there might be all manners of magic, technology, and mischief going on in her work, she's given us very real, urgent messages for like our living today, right? So, and I, you know, when I see Star Wars, when I see X-Men, there are so many things I look at and I'm like, you know, right now I think X-Men is back on TV and there's all these people going like, X-Men's too woke now. And it's just like, have you ever consider that you can't read? That's also an option. And so, you know, so I think I think, right? I think, so what am I trying to say? I think in a myriad of like genres, right? People that play in other worlds, you know, the audience is humans at the end of the day, right? So there is, I think that weight of what you're saying is already in there, right? But so as a writer, I'm saying I must go to the stars just so I can say this thing, and I know that it's going to be useful for you down on Earth, or at least I hope it is, right? And then, you know, like it's like a trickle-down system, right? Like first the poets or the novelists like dream it, and then somebody else goes and thinks it and says like, oh, that thing, that's like life here. And then we get like a new policy or something. I don't know. At least that's how I hope it works. Is that, you know, we all must do our jobs, right? And for some of us, it must be to dream in the stars. And hopefully that if we're doing our human thing right, that will have its resonance on the people who do the root work here, right? Somebody, might not be the person who writes science fiction, but they do work with the land. They do work with people. They work in their communities, right? And so how can we help them dream, and knowing that their work is to take it back to the peoples and to the lands that we live amongst, right? And then maybe they help us. Talking to them also helps us pull our imaginings from the stars and dreams into the land too. That also very much is true. I think Bluff, there's a poem. Once you said Parable of the Sower, I was like, oh my God, my last poem, the penultimate poem in the book is just Octavia Butler fan fiction. Now that I'm thinking about it, I'm just, just like, oh, that's literally just like me being like, what if I wrote a chapter of Parable and Sower? In some ways, and but I do when I read Parable and Sower, right? That feels like Earth, right? It doesn't feel like anywhere else, right? So sometimes maybe it's not dreaming amongst the stars, but like, how can I think a little bit ahead of where we are now? So one, to like warn us at times, but also to help us imagine like a world where like maybe destruction isn't the inevitability. Yeah. And I think to the natural question, right, then that forces us to, when I think about true revolution, when I think about, sort of the end of racism, sexism, homophobia, classism, capitalism, all these things, it requires fierce allyship at some point in the future, right? And not just amongst humans, but it requires me to recognize that the trees and the birds and the fish and the dirt are also my kin, are also my sisters and brothers and community members that I need to fellowship with and have a healthy relationship with. As y'all know, Texas winters have been crazy down here, right? Minnesota, I live in Minnesota. It snowed Sunday maybe for like the third time in the winter. That's very weird if you know anything about Minnesota, right? And so we are in very bad relationship with our home right now, right? And so I think part of the natural world of my work, I think it's just because I'm trying to write the world I live in and what I see. But I think it is also an exercise in holding on to a relationship with the green and blue and brown and stone everything of the planet. And it makes me want to take care of it a little bit more and be good to it. And so thank God for the trees. And I think, if I put trees in poems, maybe people will like love trees a little bit more. We should stop hating trees. That like is bare minimum. We should not hate trees. But we do, right? And like, war hates trees, right? War hates the landscape, right? You look at what is happening in Palestine or in Lebanon right now, right? Part of the tactic is to also massacre the land, not only the people, right? Cut down and burning olive trees in Palestine, right? And that's not a new tactic, right? Think about all the way, Israel doing that to Palestine is learned behavior. Like, look at what the United States has done, right? In order to take over the land and colonize this place, they had to terrorize not only the indigenous peoples of the land, but also the land itself in order to conquer it, right? The dreams of capitalism are all lead to the shrinkage of the land and the people that inhabit it. So we got to remind people what's important, right? And that's why you put people in your poems. You put the ocean in your poems. You put the future in your poems. And it makes people know that that's a thing that they can hold on to and dream towards as well. Yes.
Thanks. So you talked in the poems from Bluff about or alluded to how success has perhaps impacted your work. So in Less Hope, there's the verse, I took the awards and cashed the checks. In Volta, my oppressors fear me not. They see their chains working. And so I would love to hear you may not love to talk about it, but I would love to hear you talk about the tension between your work reaching wider and wider audiences, and I won't say the actual familiarity, but the sense of familiarity that people might have, right, with you in your work, that perhaps makes them not fear you when there's still like so much power and force in your language. So how do you navigate being propelled onto larger and larger stages? Nicole referred to the double-edged sword of literary stardom, right? So how do you navigate that?
Still figuring it out. How do I navigate? I mean, I think it was really hard for me, right? And it would be so much easier if I just wrote about flowers or if I just wrote love poems, right? If every poem was just like, you left me and I was sad. Oh, such an easy life. Right? Just like I'm jealous of those poets. No, I'm not. But because like I write about the stuff I write about, right? Like, and it because like I think for me, when I came into poetry, it was in I thought about poetry in two different ways. Messages I was getting, right? Dying. Okay, I was getting two different. Thank you. Two different sort of waves. From like poetry is like where you can like say these like honest and true and powerful things about your own life and all this other kind of stuff, right? And then I was getting all these messages of like poetry is a very political thing that you use to like transform the consciousness of those around you and help shape the world, right? And so I was like, okay, over here we have like Dear Diary and over here we have Fight the Power. And that's like all I thought poetry was. And I'm very grateful for those two roots. But the problem with like the Fight the Power poetry is transformation, which is a great thing to do, is that sometimes, like me, you are like a very like regular / broke person who is like writing these poems, and all of a sudden like you have a poem that is like an elegy for like this dead black guy, and you have poems that are about like, hey America, screw you because I want to I want to be black and alive, and then people start giving you money, right? And not like change your life money. I'm not starting no foundations out here, but like like the rent was paid, and I was like, what? Because I did that poem. And like, I really want to do these poems, and I think these poems are important. And like, and like now I'm charging on this literary career thing, and now they're like, you get an MFA for writing their black poems, and like, and it just got weird, right? And I was just like, like I look at my Nissan Sentra every day, and I'm like, I bought you because of poems. That's like very cool, but also very confusing. What to do with that, and like and people are like rewarding you, and they love the things you're saying. And the world is not changing, and yet you find yourself in more elite rooms, right? And it's just like, wow, did I like write these poems that dream and demand freedom for my people so I could hang out at the Harvard Club? Right? Did I write these poems of revolution so that I could, go to the University of Iowa and read poems? Like, that's what I do for money. It helps me sustain me, but like, right? It was like my time, and this is what they tell you in a career, right? My time was just being taken up by things that didn't matter, right? And I was being told that they were very important, and that I was showing up in those rooms to do very important things. And maybe at some level I was, but I had to reorient my time, right? And that meant making sure I was volunteering, making sure I am involved in change outside of just what I'm saying in the work, right? Put my time and my body where my hope is, became a very big thing, right? And so just reorient. And I had to like also uncouple like, okay, like, is there something that's bringing me like a justifiable shame? What do I do with that? How do I like transform myself and how I relate to, maybe these pathways that the only thing they can promise you is prestige and like capitalism and like, and capital. And that's great. It's nice to be prestigious and get the capital, but like, that's not what the heart of my poems was. And so I had to make sure I was continuing to, before I let myself completely go, I think Bluff was written to make sure I maintain my sensibility. It'd be like, you must be, somebody who not just writes of the things, but champions and is help engineering and, being a body on the ground in certain ways that, not that I had stopped, but I don't know. It was also, I think I just had to reevaluate that, like, do I think poems is one of the tools I want to pick up, right? I could leave poems behind maybe if I think like, okay, like this is a thing that maybe is going to help me bring about a world that I think is possible. And sometimes I just want to write poems because I want to write poems. So yeah, it was just a good, I had to make sure I wasn't doing it for the money. That was it. Yeah, and it was good. I think like every 10, 12 years, you should like have a identity crisis and, decide like that you still want to do what you think you're doing, right? I didn't just want to do poems. I wanted to be a poet, right? And I had to like really look at it for a long time and say, are you the work that I'm going to do? And it is. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I would appreciate hearing you talk about the role that your community plays in helping you navigate these issues, because you talked about, the Fight the Power poems, the Oh, How Beautiful Were the Flowers poems, but I think there's a third strand, and I think there are multiple strands in Danez's work, but a third strand would be the Houdini poems, meaning friends, how many of us have them?
Okay.
Right?
Sorry, I think I forgot about who. I literally, my mind went to Dua Lipa, and I was like, tell me where to go. I was like, oh my God. Also, side note, and we'll get to Houdini in a second.
Okay.
Did you know that there's a video of this white girl dancing at Houdini's grave, singing that song to him? It's the best thing. It's the best thing I've ever seen.
Okay.
She's literally at Houdini's grave, just in her little crop top, just like singing him, tell me where to go. Okay, so if you wanted to know in the Q&A what brings me joy, that does. Okay, but known hip-hop and funk band Houdini.
Yes.
Let's go. Yes.
So the poems about your friends, and you mentioned Homie as being a collection, right? Yeah. That was written about and to your close community members. Mm-hmm. And so, how do they, your friends, your family, and then the poems about them keep you grounded as you're navigating these issues of weighty topics, right? Of success, etc.
Yeah, I think I have a weird relationship to Homie. To tell the truth, I hated it for a very long time, and that's about different stuff. I think it like came under contract in a weird way. It was like a lot of enthusiasm, but also like one thing I'll never do as a poet again is sign a contract that says I will be done thinking about these poems by a certain date, because it put a little long story. We'll get to it later, but so yeah, I had like a long journey with Homie, and recently. Something I was watching a colleague do a lecture on Gwendolyn Brooks, and it really, I think, made me love Homie again. What they said was they were talking about Gwendolyn Brooks, who, oh God, I want to say the year correctly. In my head, it's either 1968 or 1972, but sometime in there, she goes to this conference at Fisk. Right, and it is a watershed moment in her career because she like meets all these younger Black writers who kind of could give a damn about a lot of like literary conventions and like literary life and are like interested in like writing poems for Black people, right? And this, like, Gwendolyn Brooks, like, it changes her relationship to everything, right? She starts publishing with Black publishers. She starts writing a different kind of poem, right? And one of the things she said, and I'm going to mess up 3 words, but the last one is the one I wanted to hit, is, like, she wanted to write poems that would free, educate. I think I'm messing up those 2, but the last one for sure was entertain her people. And that, when I heard that, I think it gave me so much permission to like what I did in Homie again. I felt really weird about Homie for many ways. But then when I thought about that, I was like, oh, I can write poems. And I already have written poems that are to like entertain, which is not a word I attach to poetry normally. Mm-hmm. But it feels, I'm like, yeah, poems are fucking entertaining. I'm sorry for cussing so much, Dr. Williams. I don't know if this is the first year featuring so many F-bombs at the lecture series. I'll try to stop. But no, you know, it made me, so yeah, entertainment, right? We can entertain, like in that act of bringing joy and glee and delight. Like, why can't my poems make somebody chuckle? You know, that's great. And I think I've done that. And it made me like that book again. And so I think, right, I think every book has its thing, right? I don't ever want to say my work is XYZ because I don't know what I'm going to be on in 2 weeks, right? If you would have asked me a year ago, are you going to be writing a whole bunch of letters to Time? I would say, no, that sounds stupid. That's all I want to do now. Like, you know, so every book has come out of its urgency and necessity, right? I literally wrote my first 2 books because I thought I was going to die twice. Once, I just thought I was just going to die because I was young and Black in America. And the second time, I thought I was going to die because I was young, Black, gay, and HIV positive in America, right? And so them 2 books was written literally to save my life. I think a lot of our like first books, right? Like Carl Phillips speaks to this well in his book, My Trade is Mystery, but he talks about like, you know, you're blessed, right? The magnum opus of your life. You kind of, it's like the thing, album, book, whatever you're doing to save your life. Then I was trying to save my life. This most recent book, the one that's about to come out, I was writing that to save my poetry soul, right? I think I really had to write that to like, to be like, nigga, so another word, I'm sorry, Dr. Williams. But I was like, Danez, do you really want to write these poems? And what do you think about it? Like, you know, so I had to like do that. So like, it was like artist therapy for me, right? I'm sorry y'all have to read my therapy notes. But they're very good, I promise, I think at least. And then, you know, Homie, I was like, what did I write Homie for? And I had to remember that after I wrote Don't Call Us Dead and went all around the country and the world, you know, yelling at white people for money. That I was like, I don't want to do that no more, you know? And what I really want to do is like write poems for, like you said, my friends and my mom, and like, oh, what a gift that was. And I think on the other side of it, how dare I look back on it as some trivial exercise? I think I really diminished the necessity of me doing that work for a while, which is part of my weird relationship with Homie. I was like, oh, this book isn't doing, like, no, bro, you just had to love, you know, and it's a very hard love in that book. There's some darker things, but like, you know, I was writing that book to say thank you in so many ways, right? And every book will have its urgency and its thing stuff. So, you know, all those are part of my work. I think poetry should fight the power. I think poetry should make your friends giggle. I think poetry should look at the flowers. I think poetry should, you know, hold your hand during a breakup. And I think poetry should change the world. Yeah.
Well, you know, the poems about your friends and family, for me, they absolutely sync up with your other work. One of the lines, I mean, there's so many beautiful verses in Summer Somewhere, but don't call us dead, call us alive, right? And so what does it mean to be alive? It means to hurt, but it also means to love, right? It means to think, to reflect, but it means to laugh. And so to think about close relationships, you know, friends. I won't waste time by flipping through the books, and also you can get your books from Black Pearl outside. You know, language of like being drunk on friend love and being wasted. It's just so gorgeous. And I think especially to read about those emotions and to think about those emotions with and through Black people, that is revolutionary, right? And that's another way of imagining ourselves into another future by recognizing the very deep and very profound relationships that already exist, and that exist in a context in which there is state violence, interpersonal violence, like all of these tragic things, but there's also love and there's joy. So I just, you know, I you know, think about those things as being together and not necessarily distinct.
I think you're right. You know, you're talking, I'm realizing what the problem is. The problem is I've agreed to show up in these poems as myself so often, right? And I think that has maybe been just like, I'm like clocking, I'm like, oh, there's just like, I think you just got scared, man, because you were a little bit embarrassed that like you like said a real thing in public, right? And then like you had to keep on going and saying those real things. Yeah, they all can live together. I don't know. They don't have to be in isolation or in competition with one another, right? And I think it's just about maybe they're also resonating with like the world. Wait, what's the question right now? I'm just about to start talking.
Oh no, keep talking because that was a comment. It was a question,
okay, cool.
So please,
Tight.
Yeah.
All right, no rebuttal. Because I don't know where I was going, but okay, I was just gonna talk until I realized I was like, "Oh wait, there is no question." Okay.
No, that was my bad.
Cool.
That was me.
Great.
No,
sorry,
no,
I felt the need to respond.
No.
I don't need to though, right?
No, it's okay.
Okay.
You don't have to. So.
Okay, great.
Okay, but I can ask you an actual question.
Sure. Or should we go to the Q&A? How where we do it on time?
Oh, actually, right on time. The timer just went off.
Oh.
So, I know that you all have been thinking. And so this is your chance to ask Danez your questions. So my friends and colleagues, Nicole and Joy, will have mics, and they'll be circulating. So please wait for the mic to get to you. We want to make sure that everyone here and online is able to hear your question as well as Danez's response. So Nicole and Joy are circling. There's a question up front here.
Two over here.
Thank you so much for being here. I'm curious to know how you slow down time, or if that is something that you're even interested in. I ask because you're writing to time.
Oh, okay. Thank you for what's your name?
Poe.
Poe?
Yeah.
Nice to meet you, Poe. Thank you for the question. How do you slow down time? Thankfully I can talk a lot. And my partner often tells me that I can give too many details to a story. And so I think that's how, when I hear slow down time, I mean, the physical way, the only way I know to tell you to physically slow down time is have a bad time. That typically does it for me when I'm not enjoying myself. Ooh, it goes slow. But in writing, it's taking time to notice everything there is to notice and to be lush. And I think to slip back and forth in time, right? Sort of to freeze it, not in, sometimes it's like freeze time, slow it down so you can like notice everything in the room, right? But then you can also like go inside people's minds, right? And like sometimes we exist in two moments at once, right? So to slow down time, maybe me looking at you, I'm talking to you, but I'm also thinking about how your shirt looks like my dad's shirt. And I'm remembering that time that my dad wore it at my birthday party and ruined it, right? And so now I'm in the moment with you, but I'm also there, right? And that requires it to slow down. I'm writing a little novel, and one of the things that like first happens, right? Like first chapter is like me and my dad like look at each other for the first time ever in the Atlanta airport, and my mom is there, and it's like awkward. And like the first 10 pages are like the 10 seconds of like them just looking at each other and like thinking things and feeling things, right? And maybe it's a horrible fiction move. I don't know. I'm a poet, so I might show this to somebody who writes fiction and they say, amateur move, this sucks. But for me, it was very fun to be like, okay, like what is everything that is like running through, this child's and these two adults' heads as like this like never was going to be nuclear family is like seeing each other as this trifecta for the first time, right? And so, yeah, so like slow it down by like freezing it, but also like allowing it to be slippery. Because sometimes we go other places. That was a short answer, Danez. For me, yeah, that was good. I didn't talk too long. What's up? Oh, we got one back there.
Hi, Danez.
Hello.
My name is Micah.
Hi, Micah.
Thank you so much for what you've done. The performance was absolutely amazing.
Oh,
we appreciate
thank you,
everything
Micah.
you do. So my question was more so to what you were referring to before about your work not wanting to be relegated to one specific category, right? Like you writing about time is pretty new. But you talked about Octavia Butler before.
Yeah.
And I wanted to know how you would feel if someone described your poetry as Afrofuturistic.
I would feel good about that. Right? Like that's definitely a thread, right? I think there's definitely like I think I'm hesitant with like all those labels because they feel so big and like there's so many poems, right? It's just like, like, yeah, sure, there's definitely like a Afrofuturist element. There's an Afro-pessimist element. There is, there's echoes of a lot of different theories or like ways of thinking and making in there. So I feel good. Yeah. Yes, I'm an Afrofuturist, sure. Or at least, I think like a good activity in my work, right? I think I was talking about this earlier, is like I like must imagine Black people in the future, right? And so in that way, I am an Afrofuturist because when I think about the future, there we are. Yes.
Hi, Danez.
Hello.
Eric with Black Pearl Books.
Oh,
good to see you again.
Good to see you again.
Yeah. Question. So you create art But then you also perform the art that you create, and a lot of it, as we've taken away from you today, is really personal. I'm curious how you keep that same drive, that same motivation when you perform something that you may have created 5-10 years ago when you are in a very different space than say you are today, but it still resonates with you to the extent that you can perform it and it still resonates to an audience, particularly as you are moving on into different stages, different spaces within your life.
Yeah. You know, I think, thankfully, poems are like wine. They get a little deeper as they get older. You know, I think, and like the good poems, right? Like there are some poems that like I wrote a long time ago and they're really bad, and I'm not gonna read those to you. But there are some, like, you know, like the last two I did tonight, right? Those poems were written in somewhere around like 2013, 14, 15, right? Not that old if you think about the full spectrum of time. But they are like a part of my body now in a different way. You know, I think I've experienced this a lot as a spoken word poet, where like, you know, sort of reading the poem, I like have like my like fake, like I'm reading this poem for like maybe one of the first 10 times, and like a lot of the poems I read at first, right, are like I'm still kind of getting to know them in the air in a lot of ways, so they just get kind of like standard reading voice, and hopefully that has enough pizzazz to make them sound pretty. But the more, you know, once I memorize it and they live in the body for longer, there are like maybe certain inflections and patterns that will remain true, but like, I don't know, the way I do Dear White America now is not at all with the same energy I used to do it before. It's a lot softer. If you can believe it or not. Or I think at least there's more fluctuation, right? And, you know, I used to be able to perform it, and now, like, my body actually kind of, like, detaches from itself. That's why I think I close my eyes a lot when I read that poem. I'm kind of just somewhere else. That also feels like a slightly protective element for myself. That if I allow myself to be, like, that's a safe way to be in it for me. And I think the closing the eyes is like, I don't know. I used to have a really hard time talking after that poem. And so I'm like, okay, how do I go as deep as possible, but still be able to like do this after? And so I think I just created that pocket, like where it's the close the eyes and the taps and the claps. I didn't used to do all that, but I do it with like old pieces that mean a lot to me. Yeah, I think with the older stuff, it just gets to inhabit you. You know, I'm not performing at that point. I'm like making a decision to like commune with you in this way and to say these words. And it's so much also about the energy in here with each other. Yeah, so it transmutes, and I'm grateful, I think. And I used to like, I think as a slam poet, when I was slamming back in the day, it was like very much the energy of like, baby boy, you only funky as your last cut. So it's just like, oh, you still doing that same tired poem from last year? Like, you ain't got nothing new? And I like used to think that same thing, but then, you know, if you ever have like, there's like certain poems you see Patricia Smith do, and they're just so good. And she might have been reading that poem since 1998, but God damn it, if she don't read that poem the next time I see her, I'm gonna be mad, right? And the same thing with like musicians, right? Like I love Janet Jackson. I even love her most recent album, but you get up there and you sing Funny How Time Flies When You're Having Fun. And all for you, and that's the way love goes. When I paid to see the concert, I want to see the hits, and so, and you know, and even those songs live in those performers in a different way, right? You know, like, so it's just allowing for that part of the art to live too, right? Like, you know, do the hits, and the hits are good because other people like them, and I like them too, and like. You know, and some messages don't get old, right? I wish, that's the other thing about writing all these poems about all this serious political stuff of the world and the tragedies. I wish I had a reason not to perform these poems anymore. I wish, you know, the world would eradicate the need to sometimes show up in front of an audience and do the poem Dear White America. But unfortunately, 2024 is the same as 2014, and I got to keep doing that poem, right? It's the same way, like, you know, certain poems is going to hit forever. You know, Lucille Clifton, Won't You Celebrate With Me is going to hit forever. As long as there is a world that makes people feel strange or othered or not worth enough to be black women, then What Did I See to Be Beside Myself is going to hit for the rest of time, right? I dearly miss and wish June Jordan was in the world right now. And sadly, you know, all the poems she wrote in solidarity with the people of Palestine are being shared because, once again, they are relevant, right? And that's the thing about art, right? It like echoes throughout time because time is so slow to change, right? So slow. There's a reason why some things are constant, right? Grief, love, death. There's a reason we can sort of look at a piece about mourning from the 1700s and know exactly what was in the painter's mind and heart. And so I'm probably far from the original question now. But I think it's our duty as artists not just to champion what is new and shiny for us, which is a very tempting thing and it's nice, but to bring what has been powerful about our work to new audiences that we're meeting deeper into our lives and careers, because those are the things that made us as artists. And if we really believe that the world needs to hear them, then let us not utter those things just the once, right? And keep on doing them. So yeah, I like my old poems. I don't know if I answered that question at all, but that was fun to say. Thank you for the question.
Sorry. I was just, this might be a strange question, but there's the way that like word and like spirit moves through you. And I think it reminds me of like the spiritual component of the Black radical tradition. And that's a heavy thing to do, right? Like to bring Black life to Black death. And so I was just wondering, like, how do you keep your channels clear so that like that can move through you?
How do I keep those channels clear? I go to my altar. I pray. I do maintain an altar. That's been good to like bring ancestor veneration into my life. It helps me stay steady. I try to keep my spirit clean, which just means being honest with the folks I need to be honest with. Going to therapy, going to church. I probably don't need to go to church, but I like going to church. I have complications with church, but I like having some ritual and communal practice that helps me talk to the divine. So I do go to church on Sundays. And I don't know, I try not to play with those channels either, right? That's why I think like I didn't do Dear White America as an example for a long time, because I was just like, I think I had muddied it, you know? And that was the thing about like, being a slam poet. Has anybody in here ever identified as a slam poet? Okay, so yeah. You know, like it like I look back on it now and I'm like, oh no, your team was losing and you really needed a great poem, and so you went up and did that elegy, or like you went up and did that like, you know, the revolutionary poem, right? And so like even with slam, like, it's PTSD, man. It's just like, what did that do for my spirit, right? What did it do that I knew the value of this thing I was saying? And because we wanted to win the thing, that I said, let's go do it. You know, you go do, you know that one about your dad and all the horrible shit he put you through? You go and do that poem real well because we need a 27 right now. You know, and like there are things I so appreciate about slam and like how it can make it can be a great way to like you know, form your chops and learn something. Like I learned a lot about editing. I learned a lot about art not being precious. I learned a lot about performance and connection and audience and and all these things, and also some scars. Yeah, and so I had to check in with myself. Yeah, and I was like, I think like back to we were talking about like, you know, just like getting money and stuff like that. I had to be like, okay, like what I kind of at one point was just like, what are the poems I'm willing to do for money? You know, you know. And so I was like, cool. Like I will like save these other poems for when they feel necessary, right? When it feels like there's something in the room that must be honored or must be spoken to, right? Or like I do poems at rallies, I do poems and stuff like that, right? So I'm like, let me save some things for the proper occasion. And then I don't have to feel so gross that like I did this gig that was definitely giving me money, but like, why did I do those poems, right? So so I had to like separate it out a little bit. And that helped me keep it clean and honest and make every moment about what needed to be done in that moment. And sometimes what needed to be done in that moment was make the rent. And sometimes what needed to be done in that moment was communing with the audience and communing with spirit, right? And I think I just needed experience and hurt to trust that needle and that compass a lot more, right? So I don't think there's anything I would do different in order to like learn that channel, but I think as the wisdom is coming to you, trust it. That's what I'm saying, right? And so, you know, keep it clean, keep it real. Keep it real. And when you feel like you're faking the funk, don't even go there. Yeah. Because that's what muddies it, right? That having to fake it. Ugh, that's going to muddy your soul every time. So keep it clean, keep it real, keep it honest, you know? And as a poet, that just means like have some other stuff in the repertoire. So for like when you need to go do the thing that you're not tugging on a line that you don't always want to tug on.
Well, if those aren't words to end on, keep it real, keep it clean, keep it honest, I don't know what is. So I know that there are a couple of more hands, but I'm going to invite you to ask Danez your questions face-to-face without a microphone, right? So again, Black Pearl Books is selling books just outside in the hallway where you entered. Danez will be signing books and greeting people. Thank you so much for this moment, these moments of communion and of community. And thank you all for coming to this year's Eric Williams Memorial Lecture. Really appreciate seeing you. Take care.